Chapter 2. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Japanese proverb. Aki, Westminster, California, 8 months earlier. Aki Munemitsu expected to finish 3rd grade at Westminster High School. At Westminster School. She planned to complete her book report on Call It Courage by Armstrong Sperry and present her oral report. She imagined she would attend the end-of-the-year picnic and jump rope with the other girls in Miss Howard's class. And she thought that when she came home on the last day of 3rd grade, her father would be there to say, "Happy summer," and take her out for ice cream. Aki never expected the one thing that actually happened. She was forced to leave behind her home, her school, her father, her whole life. The trouble started on a Saturday afternoon. It was December 7, 1941. Aki sat at the dining room table with her math homework spread out before her. It was problems in long division, 2-digit divisors into 4-digit dividends with remainders. From time to time, Aki repeated her teacher's instructions. Find the quotient, check your work. In the kitchen, her mother cleaned up the lunch dishes while the radio played a piano sonata. Aki's head was filled with numbers and music. And then the music stopped. "We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin," said a man's deep, serious voice. "The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air." Aki laid down her pencil and joined her mother, who was standing by the sink with her right hand over her mouth. They both stared at the radio, listening closely to every word. Together they had learned that at 7:53 a.m. Hawaii time, the Japanese airplanes had bombed the United States Naval Station at Pearl Harbor. No one knew how many Americans were dead or how many ships had been destroyed. When the report had ended, Aki asked, "What does this mean?" "War," her mother said. "It means there will be war." The World War and her mother's worried tone made Aki's stomach tighten. But why should we be worried, she asked herself. Hawaii is far away from California. What does a war being fought in places I've never heard of have to do with us? When Aki's father and older brother came in from the fields, they received the news in bewildered silence. Aki wondered, since both of her parents had been born in Japan, if they were ashamed of what their home country had done, and were they afraid of what their new country, the United States, was going to do? Overnight, Aki's world changed. She watched neighbors turn against their neighbors. People refused to shop in Japanese-owned stores or hire Japanese employees. Whispers and suspicious looks often followed her and her family on their visits into town. She heard strangers mutter under their breath as they passed by, "Go back to where you came from." Aki and her family suddenly had the face of the enemy. They were loyal Americans, but many people assumed that anyone of Japanese ancestry would support Japan rather than the United States in the war. Community-wide blackouts were enforced. Anxious families turned off their lights or hung blankets in front of their windows so that their homes wouldn't be easier targets for nighttime bombers should the enemy ever make its way to California. Aki sometimes felt she lived in darkness, hiding any light, listening for the roar of enemy planes or the boom, boom, boom of falling bombs. Night brought the war close, and it was too easy in the dark to imagine neighbors agreeing that it was people that looked like the Munemitsus who had brought things to this terrible point. A few days after President Roosevelt declared war on Japan, Aki saw a man standing on the street in Westminster with a sign, "I am Chinese, not Japanese." For the first time in her life, Aki wondered if there was something wrong with being Japanese, and if that were true, then there was something wrong with her. She began to think of being Japanese as not merely different, but bad. A few months later, Aki and her grandmother went into downtown Westminster to shop for groceries. They noticed that posters had been placed on storefront windows and bulletin boards all over town. They read the one posted at the entrance to the library. It began, "Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry," and went on to declare that everyone with Japanese ancestors, even people who had only a single great-great-grandparent who was Japanese, had to register with the Civil Control Station for evacuation. "What is evacuation?" Aki asked her mother. "It means leaving, moving someplace else." "Where?" "I don't know." Her mother's voice sounded flat and tired. Do we have to go? Yes, this says we will all have to go. How long will we be gone? I don't know, her mother repeated. A few days later, Aki's father went to Santa Ana to register the family with the government. When he returned, he sank into an oversized chair in the living room. Come here, he said, patting his lap. Sit with me. Aki stepped toward him, but she stopped short of sitting. When she was younger, Aki used to climb her father like a mountain, scaling his legs and exploring the forest of whiskers on his cheeks. But that was a long time ago. Doesn't he understand that I'm no longer a child? He reached out for her, but Aki didn't take his hands. I'm not a baby, she said. Of course not, her father replied with a small smile. You're right. Now, there is much to do. Her father explained that they had only a few days to sell or secure all of their belongings. Each family member was allowed to pack a single suitcase or box with sheets, towels, dishes, and a limited amount of clothing. That's all, Aki's father said. We can only bring what we can carry. There was no time to waste. Later that afternoon, Aki's father and her brother went to the First Western Bank in Garden Grove for a meeting with Mr. Monroe, the banker, about the farm. Aki wanted to go with her father, but she knew it was Seiko who helped translate between English and Japanese when her father conducted business. Aki found her mother sitting alone at the dining room table. She didn't smile when Aki came into the room. No one smiled very much anymore. Without speaking, Aki sat across from her mother. The table was stacked with many of their family's most prized possessions. While Aki watched, her mother picked up a small white ceramic bowl decorated with hand-painted red poppies. This belonged to your grandmother, my mother, back in Japan, Aki's mother whispered. Aki watched, her throat dry as her mother carefully wrapped the bowl in brown paper and nestled it into the little wooden chest in front of her. I carried it in this chest when I came here. Aki's mother reached for a rectangular tray of black lacquer with a delicate painting of a bird and a signature in Japanese characters in one corner. She tried to fit it in the wooden box, but it was too big. She sighed and said, This one is not so important. It's not from our family. She set it aside. What are you going to do with it? Aki asked. We must pack up or get rid of everything from Japan, her mother said. If we keep too many things from Japan, people may think we love Japan more than we love the United States. That isn't true, Aki protested. There's so much mistrust, so much anger everywhere. I couldn't bear to think of these things in the hands of people who would find them ugly and hateful. Aki's mother shook her head sadly. We can put some things in the attic, but we cannot be sure they will be there when we return. The war will be over someday, Aki thought, but so many of our beautiful things may be gone forever. Aki kept this thought to herself. In a world where so little made sense to her anymore, Aki would simply trust her mother and father and their decisions. Aki watched her mother pack, hoping that just sitting there quietly, being with her, helping her mother feel less alone, and that was all Aki could do. When the table was cleared and the non-Japanese dishes and serving pieces were returned to the china cabinet, Aki's mother said, We have more to do. She went to the hall closet and pulled from a shelf an old shoebox filled with family photographs. Aki recognized the envelope of photos that her father had carried with him when he moved from Kochiken, Japan, to the United States in 1915. She knew he had come to America alone when he was just 16 years old. He had been eager to work on a farm where the land was plentiful and more fertile than his ancestral home on the Japanese island of Shikoku, the smallest of the 4 main islands that made up the Japanese homeland. Aki's mother also came from Kochiken, but she had come to the United States later. Her mother opened a box and picked up a photograph of a young man wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and standing in an asparagus field. This was your father, not long after we married, Aki's mother said, holding the photograph so that Aki could see it. Aki recalled the story of how her father returned to Japan to find a wife. After her parents married, they moved to Southern California and worked as farmers. He has always been such a hard-working man, Aki's mother said. Then she set the photograph aside. Aki's mother reached for another photograph. Her fingers trembled when she picked up an image of a young woman holding an infant. Aki loved this picture of her mother, so young and proud and hopeful. "Your brother was such a lovely baby," Aki's mother whispered. Aki looked at her mother and then at the picture, and she too forgot for a moment that what they were doing and felt her mother's affection for them all. "Tell me again the story of Seiko's name," Aki asked gently. "We have a lot of work to do," her mother said briskly, but she could not stop herself from remembering. She started the story as she always did. "Your brother was born on February 13th, 1922. And you didn't know what to name him," Aki eagerly volunteered. She felt the two were like actors going over the familiar lines of a deeply loved script. "That's right," her mother said. "You went into labor on President Lincoln's birthday," Aki said. "Yes. The pain started on February 12th, and your brother was born on the following morning," Aki's mother said. "Your father and I wanted to honor our Japanese heritage, but we also knew that we were Americans now, so we named our baby Seiko Lincoln. Seiko for your grandfather and our Japanese ancestry, and Lincoln in honor of the 16th President of the United States." "It's a good thing he wasn't born on the 14th, Aki said, setting up the punchline. "That's right, or we might have named him Seiko Valentine." They laughed, and Aki felt a little better. The story belonged to her family. It was a part of her that could never be taken away. It felt good knowing that it would remain safe in their hearts, not left behind like old photographs or pottery. Aki's mother set Seiko's baby pictures aside. One by one, Aki and her mother looked at dozens of pictures. Then Aki's mother gathered a small pile of photographs, which she tucked into an envelope and slipped into the wooden chest. Aki studied each of the remaining photos, trying to memorize the images before they were lost. When she was finished, she handed the photographs back to her mother, who tore each one in half and then dropped the pieces into a wastebasket. As the time grew closer for them to leave, Aki thought more and more about the unfairness of having to leave behind her farm, her school, and her friends. She recalled her mother's response the first time she'd asked, "Why do we have to be evacuated?" "It's complicated," her mother had explained. "Some people believe that people from Japan are a threat to our national security." "How am I a threat to national security?" Aki had asked. "You're not," her mother had reassured her, "but the government doesn't know that. We'll just cooperate so that we can be home as soon as possible." As Aki helped her mother pack, the wrongness of it all swept over her. "Do we have to sell everything we don't take with us?" Aki asked. She had seen other Japanese families selling their cars, refrigerators, bicycles, and other valuables on the side of the road. "No, no," assured her mother. "We're lucky. Mr. Monroe will help us." Aki knew that her parents trusted Mr. Monroe, the banker who had helped them buy the farm. Her father wasn't allowed to buy land because he had never become an American citizen, but Mr. Monroe had found a way around this. Aki's brother had been born in the United States and was a citizen, so Mr. Monroe made Seiko the legal owner of the farm. Aki looked out her bedroom window at row after row of asparagus plants. "Will we have to give up the farm?" she asked. "I don't think so," her mother said. "Mr. Monroe will find someone who can take care of it while we're gone." Aki looked around her bedroom. "What about my room, my things?" "You can take what we can fit into this suitcase." Aki's suitcase suddenly seemed very small. "One suitcase is not enough," she thought hopelessly. Her mother began packing sheets, towels, clothing, and toiletries. "My entire world cannot fit into one tiny suitcase," cried the voice in Aki's mind. She grabbed the rag doll her mother had made for her and tucked it into her suitcase between a nightgown and a sweater. Her mother closed the suitcase, reached into her apron pocket, and pulled out a manila cardstock tag with a long string. On the card, someone had written the family name, Munemitsu, and the word Poston. The card was stamped with 5 red numbers, 13527. She tied one tag to the bag and placed a duplicate on the top of Aki's dresser. One tag stays on the luggage, Aki's mother said, and one is for you to keep. Aki looked around her room at the clothes and toys that did not fit in the suitcase. Someday all these things can be replaced, her mother said, following her gaze. Then she stopped and corrected herself. Most of these things can be replaced. On the bed next to the suitcase, Aki had placed her favorite doll, a dancer with a porcelain face and red-painted lips, the one with a red silk kimono and real hair cut into bangs. Her father had given her the doll when she was a tiny baby. It was the only thing she had that came from him alone. Without her mother saying anything, Aki knew that she could not keep the doll. It was Japanese. Bad. We will try to find another one when the time is right, her mother said. She picked up the doll and started to leave. Aki knew the doll was headed for the wastebasket. Aki had done her best to be strong for her mother, but she couldn't stop her eyes from filling with tears. She tried to distract herself by counting the number of wooden boards across the floor. 1, 2, 3. I'm so sorry, her mother whispered, handling her daughter the doll. Put it where it will be safe. Aki took the little dancer, then slipped her arms around her mother's waist. They clung to each other for a long time. When Aki finally eased her grip, her mother watched while Aki dragged a chair over to the closet and stretched in order to place the doll at the back of the top shelf, where it was hidden from view. Somewhere on that shelf, she had already placed her class photo from Westminster School. Hers was only one small face in a crowd of classmates. Surely it wouldn't offend anyone who might find it. Aki hoped that her hidden treasures, the doll and the photograph, both part of a happier time, would be waiting for her whenever she came back.